Hello, I'm Jenny. Welcome to my channel where we focus on using ordinary materials to make beautiful things. So today I want to look at using, oops, see if I can pull some of this in, at using just regular water-based markers instead of watercolors in case we don't have as many colors on our watercolor palette, or we don't have access to watercolors. Most of us have water-based markers in a variety of styles and brands and quality types. So I'd like to kind of look at how we can use those to make up for maybe what we don't have in just watercolor, like a watercolor palette. So I want to show you some of these. I'll be working on book pages because I like to use book pages in my journaling, in my junk journals. So I was just playing with these yesterday and I came up with some different ones. Some of these I use pencil on, some of these I use marker on, but we're going to focus on the markers because I think they worked a little bit better. So I just drew some basic shapes and colored in with markers, and then just used a brush and some water to get the watercolor effect. And so you can see some of these are pretty cool, I think. And I could either use the whole page as a background in a journal. I could make a pocket out of it. I could tear around some of the designs. If I only wanted to use pieces, I could use it as collage fodder. So I've got some bigger designs and some smaller ones. This was the one I started with. Then I started deciding that I wanted to play with seeing how much of a bleed I could get out around it, so that if I tore it out, I could have some color out around it and I would have like a larger swatch of color. So I was playing with that. Here's some more where I played with just letting it kind of bleed out around, and I, forced it to go out around it. I really like this one. I like the colors, that have to do with that one. Oops, popping that up off the screen. I should keep it down here a little bit. This is my poor attempt at butterflies. I can't ever get the wings to match. And then some writing. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with just our basic markers, because I think a lot of us have lots of different water-based markers. I know I do. And they do different things when you add water to them, so it's always good to maybe have a little swatch before we start. I like to swatch mine, and I like to write what the marker is on the swatch. That way I know what the marker is and I can kind of see what it's going to do. Even though it might be a little harder to see on the book page, I want to do it on the paper that I'm going to be using for my project. Because if I do it on watercolor paper, that's going to have a different effect. If I do it on typing paper, copy paper, notebook paper, something like that, it's going to have a different effect. So whatever you're going to do it on would be what you would want to do the swatches on. And so this one has a good deal more space. Maybe on this side we could do a little swatch here. So I'm going to start with probably the least expensive markers I own. And these are just Crayola Supertips. They're just a set that I got to go with coloring books. I have quite a few coloring books, and I have quite a few sets of markers, and I like them for different reasons. So start with writing Crayola Supertip, so I know what it does. And then we'll just do a little swatch, a couple of swatches of color. We'll do that color. Maybe we don't need a lot of colors because it's not about finding all the different colors that we have. It's really about seeing how they're going to look when we add water on this paper. So I just have This is a Royal and Langnickel brush. It's just a little flat brush. I like the kind of cat's tongue end and the flat brush. I think it gives you a little more control. So as you can see, as soon as we add a little bit of water to this, we're getting a definitive watercolor effect. Our lines are disappearing, although we're getting a little color transfer there, but that's okay. It's not, we weren't really interested in the color as much as just to see what it did. So this dissolves right away. You can see that I'm getting a little bit of peeling up of the paper, but once it's dry, it's not too bad. So, but you can see, and I can add a little more water and make it lighter. It's getting faded. I'm barely touching it, and I'm just getting a really faded effect. Very watercolory. So we could even do a page where we do some different colors in the background and sort of blend them all together. We'll do that in a few minutes, maybe. We'll do one of those pages. So you can see this particular marker, which is one that lots of people have. It's readily available. It's not very expensive. Does a good job of dissolving into the water and looking very watercolory. Here's another one I have. This it just says Conte Color Felt Pen. I think these came with a coloring book that I bought. So Conte Felt Tip is what this one is. So let's try some of these and we'll see what they do. For the writing, so that I make sure that it doesn't dissolve in the water, I just have a Sharpie ultra fine, and that one is a waterproof pen, so it's not going to get blurred up when we hit it with water. So we'll try a couple of these. There's that color. Try some greens here. I like green. I don't have as many of these. These were, as I said, I think these just came with a coloring book that I bought. Go back in and get some of that water. Make sure I don't have any color left since I bled it over there. And we'll just see what we can get. Again, I'm getting some nice dissolving here and kind of blend it together. Get a little more water. A little more of the lines. We can see a little more of those lines, especially on that darker green. Although now that we've hit it with enough water, we can kind of get rid of some of those. So we're seeing a few more of the lines on the darker color right here. This is dissolving a little better. When we get down here, we don't see nearly as many of the lines. It kind of all dissolved, and you can see on this one where it's almost dry down here, and it's kind of given us that really beautiful watery effect. So we didn't even have to get out our watercolor paints. We just need a brush and some water and our normal pens. Let's see what else I have. I have, these are Crayola Signature pens. They're two-tipped. So there's a fine tip in one color, and then there's kind of a brush tip in the other color. Generally, the brush tips tend to do better because they don't leave as much of a line, so that you don't have that. So we'll do Crayola Signature. We'll try those and see how we do. Try a couple blue, and you can see I'm just kind of scribbling some stuff down here. Stay with that kind of brush tip. And every time I open it, I end up opening the one that's not the brush. So let's see how we do with those. Just give a little bit of water here. You can always add water, but you can't really take it away, so it's better to start with less water. And then add more if you need it. Oh, these are blending beautifully. Look at that. A lot of color there, a lot of pigment. And we can see a little bit where we did the marker, right? Just like up here we can. Down here we still can too, but not as much. That one worked really well. I like that one. So that may be one we come back to. What else do I have? I have some Staedtler pens. And these have kind of a fat tip on one end and a fine tip on the other. So let's try those. I feel like these are probably pens that most of us have this kind of, you know, one of these brands. These are pretty common. Pretty common brands for coloring and journalers and things like that. So we'll just lay down a little bit of red. I really like that red. Maybe just a little bit of brown. Boy, that's pretty dark, isn't it? Let's see. I was hoping for kind of a bricky red. Okay. We'll see. We'll see how the browns go. Let's put a little bit of light in there too, just to see how that works. Okay, back to our water. Start with the light one, since it'll get covered up if we're not careful. So this one is dissolving, but not as easily. We have a lot more of the residual where we colored. So that might be okay if we're just running a line around something and we just want to blur the line. That seems like we'd still have a line, but it would just blur it. But we've got a lot of the pen mark left on that one. So that probably isn't my favorite to get just a watercolor effect. So far, I'm really liking the two Crayola ones. They seem to dissolve really well. So I do have a few more, believe it or not. So let's try. This one is a Zig Clean Color Real Brush Marker. So these are a water-based brush marker. So we'll put, they're the only Zigs I own, so we'll try those. So, and I have a feeling these are probably going to go pretty well because they're pretty wet to start with. So I think, you know, some of them, the wetter they are, the more easily, of course, it's going to dissolve. So we'll try. Some of them are drying out. I'm getting to the end of those. I really like those markers, and I used them a lot. And so I probably don't have as much ink left in them. So we can kind of blend back this way towards our, get some of that color. That's a nice watery color look, isn't it? That blended out a lot, although we can still see where we colored. Maybe not as much when it's dry. We'll see what it looks like when it's dry. But when we go back, you can see here, we've lost almost all of that definition of where we actually colored. Here we have a little bit. We've got a little more on this one. We still have quite a bit on these, and we've got some showing through here. So it kind of depends on whether or not you want those lines to disappear, or you just want to, you know, do you want it to be totally watercolory, or do you want it to, like from the edge, go in and you still see the darker part? Let's see, what else do I have? These were a gift from a friend, so I'm not sure how expensive they are. They're called Aqua Markers, and they are meant to be treated like watercolors, so I imagine they're going to be pretty juicy here. So I'll do the Aqua Marker. So I imagine this one's going to be, you know, a pretty good blend. Although on these, they were, as I said, they were a gift, and I have one small pack. You know, that's the trouble sometimes with some of the more expensive pens like that, is you only have a few of them, so you don't have very many colors. And of course, you can always blend colors, but if you want 3 shades of green, you know, although I can see, so this one's watering out pretty good, but you can still see there's quite a bit of the lining left where we colored. So I'm still leaning towards the 2 Crayola ones, which are probably the least expensive ones. I think I have one more set of water-based markers here that we can try. We'll see how they look. I don't have very many of those either. These are the Prismacolor Scholar markers. So we'll jot that down. Prismacolor makes several different quality levels in their pencils and their markers, and so the Scholar ones are something students would use, so art students, high school students, things like that. So they're not the highest quality, but they're good quality. They're not meant to be, you know, the lowest quality, something you could buy. So let's see how those work. So those are really holding their color. So that would be okay if we just wanted maybe to bleed around something, but that's not really looking super watercolory at all. That's just kind of bleeding and leaving that. So that's not probably one I would want to use. So we're losing a little bit of that with the Aqua Marker as it dries. But I think realistically, the best ones seem to be the 2 Crayola ones for what we're going to do today. So different markers for different things. So we'll use those. So whatever you have, you know, take a minute, use the paper that you plan to use, and try it out to see which ones are going to work the best. It could be that if I had different paper, that one of the other markers might work better. But because of the paper I'm using, which is old book page, these are kind of blending better and giving me more of that really watery look that I'm after. So we'll stick to the Crayola ones today. Okay, so let's grab a piece of book page. We could draw something botanical. Let me show you a book that I like. There's a whole series of these books, 20 Ways to Draw Different Things. This one's 20 Ways to Draw a Tree by Eloise Renouf, and I think that's how you say her name. Each of the books, I think, is by a different artist. I have another one, 20 Ways to Draw a Cat and 44 Other Animals by Julia Kuo. These books have lots of different styles of the same thing so that you can see different line drawing kind of things. So this is a good way to practice drawing. If you want to draw something in particular, there's a space to practice here. You can practice elsewhere. I don't usually practice in the book. I usually do it in my sketchbook. But you can see some of these are easier than others. This one is a pretty basic line. Some of these have more detail than others have. This one might be a little more challenging because of the 3D look to it. Some of them are very modern. This is really cool, right? Here's some horses that are different. There's just a little straight on head. and they, you know, they go to running. So, and these are things that are doable. They're not, you don't have to be super practiced. You don't have to, you know, being able to draw is a skill. So anybody can learn to draw. It's just a matter of how much you're willing to practice, like any other skill. So these are things that are good to practice on, that you can end up with something cute that you might use in one of your journals, or that you want to draw for somebody. I really like the jellyfish. I think this one's beautiful. So you know, the one with the animals is a lot of fun. It's a little more challenging. Some of the animals are a little more challenging than some of the ones with the 20 ways to draw a tree. So let's take a look at these. I find the butterflies challenging because I can't ever get them even. But thistles are pretty forgiving, you know, so we can draw some of those. There's the peacock feathers. I showed you the one I drew. Different seed heads and grasses and grains. So there's just lots of ways to draw different things that are pretty straightforward, not too complicated, so that you can add your own artwork to your pages. And it just gives it an even more personal touch. Some of them are a little more complicated with a little more line work than others. But this one's pretty straightforward. So depending on your confidence and skill level, start with the ones that look a little easier, move up to the ones that look a little more challenging. You know, don't be afraid. If you draw in pencil, you can always erase. You can draw in ink and work with what you have. You can always go over it in ink once you draw it in pencil. So you can always draw lightly in pencil and then go back and erase. You can always look at this for inspiration and do your own thing. Get the idea, you go, oh, I get the idea. I'm supposed to do like a little cap and this, and you know. So you get the idea of what something might look like, and then do your own. And it's okay. I think one of the things I really like about those books is that it's showing 20 different ways to draw a tree, and some of them are very traditional and some of them are not. So you can see I did that sort of thing on the mushrooms. I looked at some of theirs, I drew one or two, and then I started playing with drawing something else. Same thing kind of with some of the leaves. I drew a few that looked like something from the book, and then I just drew a few that I liked. Then I drew a couple of the flowers, and I just put in something that was a curlicue that I liked. Same kind of thing with the blossoms. I looked at a few of theirs, and then I drew something similar. Right? This one I was a little more careful with drawing what was there, although I added some greenery to this. So this one, again, I looked at it, and then I just kind of did my own thing. I went, oh, it's the feather has an eye, and then it just has kind of swooping up next to it, and then I just sort of bled the paint in. Same thing with the branches, right? So you have a lot of freedom with what you draw and how you get there. So one of the easiest things to draw is just you know, a set of leaves. So we'll start with that. So we'll just kind of draw across the page. And we'll just do kind of one little leaf shape. You can do very rounded shapes. You can do oblong shapes. You can do jagged edge shapes. Any shape you like. Leaves come in all different shapes and sizes and colors. So do what makes you happy. And then you can like alternate them, which maybe I'll do. And, you know, just make it easier. Turn the page to help you, right? A lot of people are like, oh, you're supposed to be able to draw it straight from where you are. Well, who says? Who says you have to draw it where you are? You're allowed to turn the page. You're allowed to do it any way you choose. because it's your art and it's your design and your creation. Right? So do some of these. I'm looking at these thinking these may be a little small. And so I might go back and add something around them just to beef them up a little bit, because the one on the end is a lot bigger, isn't it? So, you know, and things like that happen. You do stuff and you look at it and you go, maybe I should have made those a little bit larger. So now that I'm thinking about it and looking at it, I decided that that's probably true. I probably should have made those bigger. So let's see what we can do to remedy that. There's always something you can do to fix it, right? Don't toss it or give up on it. Just fix it. And so one of the things we can do is add this, so we can add that on the outside of that one, and we'll add it to the inside of this one so that we have our leaves are still the same kind of leaf. But they're a little larger now, right? And then we can do that maybe when we color it. Maybe we'll color the outer edge a lighter or darker color. We could put a design around the outside edge before we color it, make it look interesting. We could do it after, but then we have to wait for it to dry. So if you want to add details after you do the watercolors, you certainly can. You just have to wait for your paper to dry so that your pen will write on it once again. They kind of look like little flames, don't they? Like little candle flames instead of leaves, but that's okay, because we'll make them look more like leaves in just a minute. And when you draw something for your journal, it's really just about making something that you like. It's not really about making something that's necessarily realistic, right? But if we want it to look more like a leaf, we can certainly add some veining there, just so that we know they're supposed to be leaves. Right, and that doesn't have to be perfect either. Sometimes we worry about making things perfect, and the problem is things that are perfect aren't usually done by hand, right? Humans are not necessarily perfect, and we don't necessarily draw things perfectly. I mean, there are things that you will see that are photo perfect, and that is one style, certainly, of art. But I prefer, personally, my personal style is something that is a little more definitely handmade, that looks a little more organic, that looks more doodle kind of oriented. I like doodles and I like doodling. So that's kind of what I like to do. Let's see. Should we add some lines on the outside, you think? Oh yeah, that looks good. We'll just carry some of those then to the outside here. That'll kind of connect those. And it's really just a matter of experimenting until you get what you like. Add some lines. If you don't like them, add some more lines. Do something different. Right. The worst thing that can happen is that at the end you don't use it in your journal, and you tear it up for collage fodder. And even then you'll have something colorful and pretty. So even if you end up not caring for the drawing, the picture, and you tear it up to use in pieces, you still have something usable and beautiful that you have created. So either way, it's all good. Okay, let's start with a little bit of yellow on that outside, just to give us kind of a golden. And you can see I am not coloring carefully because I'm going to hit this with water and it's going to bleed, and they're going to bleed into each other. And it's going to bleed outside of the leaves. So I may help it. I may want to help it bleed outside the leaves. I may try to contain it more in the leaves. So it just kind of depends on how it looks when we're doing it. But this is not fussy. You don't have to color, you know, exactly in the lines. It doesn't have to be perfect. Let's do a little bit of lighter green, because once we start smearing it all together here, right, those lines are going to fill in. That white part's all going to fill in. And if we get a lot of pigment on there, it's going to be pretty dark. And I like the really light kind of watery effect, so I don't want it to be too full. Let's see, here's a little bit darker green. Maybe I can just run up the middle with, just to add a little bit of dark. We may have to go back and do that again after we add some water. Okay, let's see if we can make some magic happen. I've got my wet brush here. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. I don't care if the yellow kind of gets a little lost in there. I just want a little bit of that hint of yellow. So just a little on the edges. You can see it's a little lighter on the edges. A little darker in the middle. You can see that darker piece. If I get a little too much green, I can always wipe it off a little bit over on my paper. Try to keep a little more of the yellow. You can see I'm not even being fussy with my brush. I just have that little flat brush that lets me get up to the edges of things and kind of swirl it around. Use whatever kind of brush you like. A lot of people like round brushes. I just happen to like a little flat kind of cat's tongue shaped one. I like the little rounded edge. Just feels softer to me than a straight edge. Some of that yellow in there if we can. Letting the greens blend into it. So you can see we started with this thing that kind of looked, you know, a little messy, a little childish. But when we use some water, we definitely get that beautiful watercolor look. And it was super easy. And you'll find some colors seem to do better than others. I think, see, now I really like that. I think that's really would be a nice background. I can collage down here. I can put a focal point. I can put a pocket so that this is peeking out of the pocket. You know, I could put a focal point up here. I could do some collaging around it, or I could tear it out and put it on top of something else I've collaged. And even though, I mean, it's wet, but it's not super wet. You can see on the back, you know, the marker has come through, but the paint has not. So it's not super wet, which means it won't take too terribly long to dry. We can see all three colors. You can see the yellow on the outer edge. We can see that kind of medium green. And then we've got that kind of darker green in the center, giving it some depth. So that one is a keeper, I think. Let's take a look at what happens if we just do some color. Like if we wanted to make a background that was just a watercolory background. Let's pick some different colors. Let's start with maybe some different pinks and reds, and we'll kind of move through. Yeah, we'll kind of move through some pinks and reds. Let's see what we can do if that happens. What we can do with that. So maybe just, you know, I just want to kind of lay down some background color. If I'm going to do a page, and I just want it to have some color. A lot of the journals that I see don't have a lot of color. A lot of people are much more neutral in their color choices, with maybe one pop of color. I am definitely a color girl, so I'm always about, you know, how many colorful things can I put in something. And so I don't usually do like a whole journal in one color scheme. I do different colors on different sets of pages. So like if you're looking at a double page spread, those colors go together, but not necessarily with the colors on the next page. So I've got a little bit bigger brush here. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what this does. Gonna probably take a little more water. So this is kind of just laying a color wash. If you wanted to dye, if you've done some dyeing of papers, this is one way to do it. You can do this as a background and then use some acrylic paints or inks over the top to stamp, or you could use a stencil, certainly, to add some design to something like this. You could probably even draw around, use your stencil to draw around and color in to get some design. So we should do that. That might be an interesting something to try. I haven't tried that. Using my stencil as a template, as a drawing template. Oh, so this is going to be very reddy, pinky, rainbowy. So I can see this might make a fun background. Might make a fun envelope or collage fodder if you just want some color, some pieces of color. It might make nice little snippets. All right, get some of that off. Let's see what happens if we can pull some of that color up this way. Got a lot of that light up there, but let's see if we can pull some up. A little more blend here. See, and I think that's really pretty. So when it's dry, that's going to make a nice background color. And you could do that in greens, blues, purples, You know, any color oranges, any color you like, you know, would be a nice background for a page. You could use it in your journal. Let's grab a stencil and we'll try stenciling something. Okay, I just grabbed the one on top in my stencil stash. You can see this one is well loved. So we'll get another piece of paper here. And so what I'm wondering is might be fun, instead of using paint, to trace in parts of the stencil. And we'll do maybe this little piece. I think I probably have other stencils that have bigger pieces on them that might have been an easier choice. Not necessarily better. But I think when we pick this up, we can connect anything that looks like it needs connecting. How about this over here? All right, let's see what we've got. Okay. See if those were connected. Okay, let's still coloring with those and see what we can get. We'll use some oranges and yellows on these. Just kind of do some yellow out around. Again, we don't have to get all the way up to the edge because we're going to let it bleed out a little bit, so it really doesn't matter if we cover every little bit. Okay, we just need some color to move around. Right. One of my cats is down here talking to me. Her name is Tish Monster. Her name is actually Morticia. She and another cat we adopted at the same time are Gomez and Morticia. But as if you have cats, as you know, cats end up kind of choosing their own name. Let's do a little in between here just to kind of, and so we name our cats and then they end up getting called something based off of that name, but it's not exactly that name. So she is indeed a little monster and she's cute, so we call her Tish Monster. And earlier she was up here trying to drink the water for my brushes, which is not a good thing. So let's just see. Maybe we'll do something in between there too, just so we have some color in there. All right, let's see how that works. I haven't tried that before with a stencil, but might be a fun way to use our stencils in a different way. Let's see. I think I've got some green still on this brush, so we'll get that off first. These might be fun little doodads we could cut out and use in collages. Right. If you have a stencil of flowers or something particular that you really like, some foliage or mushrooms or flowers or something that goes with the page you're doing, you could always stencil some of it on and then use your watercolors, your markers, and to make it look like it's watercolored in. It's kind of cool. I might cut around that. I do find that if I think I'm going to cut something out, if I go out around the edge a little bit, it gives me a little leeway. Then I don't have to cut quite up to the edge, and I still have a little bit of color there. Of course, you can always ink up the edges to get rid of any white edges that you might have. But if you don't have any of the grungy inks, that might be a way to get around it, is, you know, just do some watery stuff out around it like this, so that then when I go back to cut, if I cut just on this side of the line, I still have a little bit of that color. Right, so I can cut it out and use it as a design element later, and I can see the book page behind it. It's got the watercolor look to it. It's definitely something that, you know, would make fun collage items. So this is the kind of thing I'm just, you know, I mean, I just grabbed this stencil, so any stencil you have would be a good choice for something like that. Okay, so I hope that you have kind of gotten an idea after thinking about these. And let's grab that one we started over here. That's turning into a background. So we can do a design, something botanical that we can use as a page. We can create a background. We can create elements to cut out to put on a page. And we can give it all that watercolor painterly look just using our water-based markers and a little bit of water on a brush. So don't think that you have to have a wide palette of actual watercolor paints. You can use what you have and create something beautiful. I hope you will join me next time, and have a great day.